Hey everyone, I'm Nadia. I work on our editorial and community here at Substack. Can everyone hear me? I don't exactly know how this all works. Type something in chat if you can hear us and see us. Great. Thanks, Kat. Thanks, David. So yeah, as mentioned, really excited to have you all here. This is by far the biggest Substack event that we have hosted. So you all must be very curious to hear what Scott has to say, which is really great. A couple just sort of logistic things. Because we just have like a very large group here, if you have a question for the Q&A at the end, can you use the Ask a Question button? It should be at the bottom of your toolbar. I will try to pay attention to the chat and also add questions as needed, but I'll be looking at that to ask Scott questions once we're done. As mentioned, I'll start by turning things over to Scott for a little bit, and he's going to tell us about how he grew his newsletter. And afterwards, we'll do another 15-minute or so Q&A. But yeah, if you have questions, please put them in the Ask a Question button, and I'll try to keep an eye on chat. So yeah, I'm really excited to introduce Scott Hines, who writes Action Cookbook, which is not actually about cooking, but is a collection of essays about life and parenting and sports and architecture. He joined us at Substack, I think last fall, roughly, from writing a newsletter elsewhere called The Seventh Circle, and came over to Substack and has been steadily growing his list and also launched paid subscriptions earlier this month, which has been really cool to see. And so when we were thinking about what's a good Substack writer to ask about growing your list to get your first 1,000 signups, we immediately thought of Scott, who has just really put in, as far as I could tell, a lot of hard work and grit just to get his newsletter started. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Scott for the next half hour or so, and he's going to tell us about growing your newsletter to your first 1,000 signups.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Scott Hines. I write. I'm the sole writer and creator of the Action Cookbook newsletter, which I originally launched the predecessor to it on Substack in late June last year, and converted it to the current name and iteration in October. And I can elaborate on how that took place, because that feeds into some of the suggestions that I'm going to make in this. Newsletter publishes 3 times a week. It's, in terms of the subject matter, it's kind of all over the place, as Nadia touched on, and I can discuss how that works as well. But this newsletter was built from scratch. I did not come in with an established email list. I had done some steady freelance in a few places for the last 5 years or so, from which I had people somewhat familiar with me, but I did not have any sort of list that I was bringing in here. So what I've been able to build on Substack has been truly from the ground up through, in the last 10 to 11 months. I don't come from a media background. I don't have a degree in journalism or writing or anything. I'm actually an architect in my primary job, and I live in Louisville, Kentucky right now. So I think this is proof that if you have something to say, Substack allows you to do this from anywhere, from any start. Last year, I said, after losing a consistent freelance gig that I had had for a few years, I launched this publication as a way of continuing to write the things that I wanted to write about, rather than chasing specific freelance work, trying to figure out what somebody else wanted to do. I got used to writing, and I wanted to continue it in a way that I had more ownership over. And Substack has been really great for that. I got my first 1,000 subscribers in about 4.5 months, which was really great. And as it stands right now, I'm at about 2,300 free subscribers. And as of today, I think 315 of those have converted to paid subscriptions, which is really expectations. And I'll talk about some of the ways that I got there, some of the practices that I've adopted. One of the things I want to talk about that I think is most important is having a presence. And I think what's interesting about the Substack system, what's great about what they provide, is the bones are there. And with just a little bit of work, what you're doing, even if it's for 10 people or for 100 people, it can look the same functionally as some of their top newsletters, the ones that are making 6 figures a year in income and have tens of thousands of subscribers. Functionally, yours won't look that different from theirs as long as you take a few steps right up front. And this is something I failed to do in the first couple of months and had to sort of be coaxed into doing. But when you first set one up, I encourage you, fill everything in. Pick a name that you're comfortable with. Pick a name that you want to work under. I'm the Action Cookbook Newsletter because I chose a non sequitur of a name for Twitter 8 years ago. That was a British cookbook from the 60s, and I just thought it was a funny phrase. And now I'm writing under it professionally. So choose a name you like. But also give yourself a logo. You're a professional graphic designer or to hire anybody to do it. I created something in about 20 minutes on a Photoshop app on my phone. It's not a fancy logo, but it's identifiable. And what I like is when I go into the Substack charts page, the Discover Writers page, I can pick mine out right away, create a logo. In the About Me section, I think a lot of people miss this. When you're setting it up, talk about what it is, because there's some default stuff that Substack puts in there, which is great, but I see a lot of people leave those defaults in there, and I think it's important to really professionalize what you're doing, go in and talk about what you're doing, talk about where people might know you from otherwise, or what sort of expertise you're working on otherwise, have all of that in there. Same with the emails that generate when somebody signs up, the emails that generate when somebody considers converting. All of that, it doesn't take very long to fill that out, but it really gives the veneer of you're doing something professional, even if you're starting from a very small base. And another thing is, if you're coming in with some familiarity, as I said, I did this freelance work, people somewhat knew me from that. When I first launched this Substack, it was in support of a podcast that I had launched with a friend last summer. And I had sold it as such. I said, we have the podcast, but the newsletter is in support of that. And that was a sports podcast. I was happy with what we did, but for many reasons, we weren't able to keep doing it. And once that ended, I realized the newsletter was getting a bigger response. So I decided to keep it going. And I converted from being named after this podcast to being named after what people know me as. And that single day that I made that change was my biggest percentage change in followers. I gained probably 20% that day. And I think what that is introducing it as a side project encourages people to think, well, I'll see how that goes. Introducing it as you and how they know you, people are like, oh, great. All the people who hadn't signed up when it was in support of the sports podcast, but knew me, were familiar with me, signed up that day, and I gained, I think 90 followers that single day when I'd already been doing it for 3 months. The other thing I would stress in this presence, in my section of my notes, is no one knows your metrics but you. And going back to what I said about, you have the same visuals as the large newsletters. No one can tell if you're only writing for 10 people at the outset. Only you see those numbers. Write like you're writing for 10,000 people from the get-go, because all it takes is one post going viral, and you are writing for 10,000 people, and you want to be ready for that. You don't want it to look like somebody's live journal from 20 years ago. You want it to look like a professional newsletter that people are going to want to continue to support. My second big area that I would talk about is consistency. And I think this is really important. I think this is a big part of how I've been able to succeed, is determine in advance what kind of publishing schedule you're going to want to do and what you can commit to. Maybe that's once a week, maybe that's twice a week. For me, it was 3 times a week. That's what I was used to doing. But I really set in that I'm going to do this 3 times a week, and I'm going to do it at specific times. For me, I publish Monday morning, Wednesday morning, and Friday morning between 8 and 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, and that does not change. And that's not to say that those times are any better than any others, but they're consistent. And I think where this is important is when I've seen people launch Substacks, a lot of times it's check back here soon. I'm going to be publishing when I feel like it. And it fails to catch on. And for me personally, the reason I did this commitment is that I write well when I'm under a deadline. So a lot of times I'll get to a Tuesday night and think, oh no, I have to write something for tomorrow. And sometimes it's my best work. Now that may not be transferable. Not everyone writes out of panic like I do, but committing to that schedule helps people anticipate it. And I think that's really important right now, that there's not a lot framing our weeks right now. Time is squishier than it's ever been. It's hard to know what day it is when everyone's working from home and everything is canceled. So your newsletter can be the thing that reminds somebody that today is Thursday and it's 2:30 and there's Sarah's newsletter. I'm looking forward to that. Great. And I think another reason this is important is one pushback I got from people unfamiliar with the newsletter model was, oh, I already have enough email. I don't need more emails coming in. And I get that. We all get a lot of email. I think if you commit to a dedicated, regular schedule of putting these out, it becomes more of an event in people's week than when it comes in unexpectedly. It's just like another task. It's, oh, I got to read this now, and then they don't. So I think that's been really important, both for encouraging me to be consistent with the writing, but getting the readers used to the regular flow of things. And keeping on that regular schedule also has allowed me some flexibility, that they know when to expect the email. They may not know what I'm doing in there, which is great because I change my topics a lot. It becomes part of their mental week. Now, I would mix that consistency with flexibility. And the way I do this personally, one of my 3 weekly emails, the one I send out Friday morning, I have a very consistent format on. I started with the podcast is I'm recommending 7 good things a week. And it's very simple in that format, that usually I have a recipe that I'm suggesting. Action Cookbook has nothing to do with cooking, but now I actually do feature a lot of cooking content in it. That's pure coincidence. But I'll have a recipe, a cocktail, a book recommendation, a musician that I recommend, a couple other things that change from week to week, and pictures of dogs, because it's the most base level internet way to get people to read your thing. What the recommendations are each week changes, but that format is the same every Friday. And the reason I do that is, if people don't read the other stuff as consistently, having one regular thing that they can expect to be the same keeps them coming back. And that consistency, the essays that I do on the other days may not necessarily connect with people from week to week, but knowing that there's that Friday event, and that goes back to the regular scheduling, that Friday event gives them something to look forward to. And I've found this bears out. I track my metrics obsessively, and I think Substack gives you great metrics to tell how you're doing in terms of how many people are opening them, how many people are viewing through the web, all of that. That one's always my most consistent. It's got the lowest floor. It doesn't necessarily have the highest ceiling. And the important part there is having that consistency once a week. Then in my other ones, I take a lot more liberties, a lot more flexibility in what I'm doing. I write on a lot of topics. When I first started this out, I came from a freelance sports blogging background, but I kind of got tired about writing about sports all the time. And so I just started writing about other things. I wrote about, I have 2 young children. I write about that. I come from an architecture background. I'll write about architecture, or distance running, or cycling, or whatever I'm feeling like talking about. If I plant a garden, I want to talk about planting the garden this week. And what the Friday emails buy me is the flexibility to do those as I see fit, because those may not connect with a particular person, but they stay around for the consistent reasons that they've been for. But those have the highest ceiling. That I use the example. I had a post back in January. I planned to try and make homemade soup dumplings for my recipe on Friday, and I completely botched it. I did a terrible job. I tried to make 40. I came out with 7. It was an absolute disaster. And so instead, I wrote about that disaster. I wrote a post that was very successful. It was the simple joy of effing up in the kitchen. And that got caught on by a prominent food writer, a much larger blog, and suddenly it was my most viewed post by a factor of 10. Now, that wasn't any part of any editorial consistency that I had before, but I'd been allowed that flexibility to take some shots. So I'm rambling here, but the point of this is have some consistent things and then take some chances. And if you balance the two, you can gain new readers on the chances while keeping the consistent readers with the consistent content. Building off of that, I think you have to give your readers incentive and engagement. You have to give people a reason to stay interested and feel involved. And what I think I take away from this is the kind of content that feeds into people's lives. Now, you may be writing on entirely different things than I write on. Hopefully, you are. But it's, I started sharing recipes because somebody makes that recipe. They're thinking about me and my writing when they're not at the screen. And whatever form that takes, if you provide some kind of content that gets people thinking about you when you're not, more than just 5 minutes of scrolling by the email on your phone when you first get it, something that sticks with people will get them coming back. And again, I provide these recommendations for, somebody doesn't like the recipe, but they like a musician, they read the book, whatever, things like that. Again, that's not saying that you should do that in particular, but think about how you can engage with your readers beyond just lecturing at them. And I think also Substack provides tools for that. You can do discussion threads, which I think are great. Sometimes in between pieces of writing, maybe do a talk back on it. I talked about this subject on Wednesday. On Thursday, let's have a discussion about how this relates to things in your life. Encourage people to comment on your posts. The comment function is always there, but I realize that when I tell people in the post, comments are below, I get more engagement. And I try to be engaging with that. When I see a comment, I respond to it as long as it's not a negative or abusive comment. The internet is the way it is, but people are very supportive and really love engaging with writers. And I think Substack allows that really well. Another simple thing is giving them some ownership to contribute something, whether in whatever small way. I started off in these Friday emails ending with a picture of my dog. I have a very photogenic Welsh Corgi. I know how the internet works. I share pictures of her and people respond to them. But I've kind of gotten tired of doing that too. So I started asking people to send me pictures of their dogs and share them. And again, this is the most base level internet thing, but it got people more engaged, that instead of sharing just me at you, there's a dialogue back and forth. And I think that's really important. One of the biggest things that I really had to be talked into is promotion, is not being afraid to yell about it all the time. There's a tendency to create something and want to drop a link on social media and say, here, I wrote a thing, and almost apologize for it. And you can't do that. You have to be convinced of the work, you have to sell the work, and you have to do it more than you think that you do. You might think that announcing that you've started a Substack and announcing that you wrote a newsletter will be enough, and the people who like you and follow you will get on board. But it's really easy for people to miss things, or it's easy for people to see those announcements and think, yeah, I should do that, and then they don't. Repetition is important. You're going to feel like you're being annoying, and I probably am, but it may take 5, 6, 7 times of somebody seeing something for them to think, yeah, I should get on that. I should subscribe to that. I feel like I'm being incessant when I tweet over and over again about my newsletter, but every time I do it, I gain views, I gain subscriptions. You have to bring people to the work. Once you do, and once they get hooked in, the great thing about Substack is they'll stay. I have very little churn in my newsletter. It's getting them in the door in the first place. Other ways to increase that engagement that I found, instead of just dropping a link, is provide previews. For straight up writing, I I always try to have a block of text that I can screenshot and put in an image when I post the article, because people, if you say I wrote about cycling on Monday, I wrote about cycling, maybe they'll read that. But if it's more than that, and you want people to realize that it's more than that, scrolling past and seeing a paragraph, you're likely to stop, look at that. Well, now you're already 20% of the way into an article, and you're going to click through and read it. And that has made a huge difference. Again, I track my metrics obsessively. I know that when you put blocks of text into your previews, it gets people reading. Another thing you're going to want to do, and this goes back to what I said about filling out everything, professionalizing it, is try to have images in every post, even if it's just sort of a cover image. I wrote an essay about cycling. I found an old picture of me on my bike. I put it in there. And the reason I do that, even if it doesn't specifically serve the writing, is that if somebody else shares your link on social, that will pop up. Otherwise, it'll pop up with sort of just the Substack logo. It's more engaging if it looks like it's a richer content. And so it could be a photo you create yourself. You can go onto Creative Commons and find licensing free media that you can use for that. But always have something in the post so that when it ends up on social, it looks engaging. It looks like something people are going to want to see. Going back to what I said about presence, I think about something that one of my freelance editors once told me. I sent in a pitch that I thought was kind of weird, and we were familiar with each other, so I prefaced the pitch by saying, listen, I know this is kind of weird, but here's my idea. And in rejecting the pitch, which she did, she was very kind enough to say, listen, don't apologize for your work. If you're not convinced of it, nobody's going to be convinced of it. You need to come in believing in it. And I know that's sort of rah-rah, but it's true. Sell it, sell it. Be convinced of the work. Be convinced that people need to read it. They just haven't seen it yet. I've got notes, sorry. And then, really sort of the end of my thoughts is that you should write your own story. I think the beauty of the Substack model, and I am a big believer in what Substack is doing right now. I think this is the future of online writing. The future of online media it's the lack of editorial and advertising mandates. You're not writing what somebody thinks they can sell. You're not writing what somebody thinks other people will click on. You're writing what you believe in. And it may be a very esoteric topic. It may be something that you think doesn't have a large audience, but you don't need a large audience at first. You need a devoted audience. You can write what you believe in. If only 10 people like it, those 10 people are finding something that they're not going to find anywhere else, because no editor would pick something up that would only get read by 10 people. But those people will stay, they will share it, you will find more. And that's really that's important. I've had so many freelance pitches that I've put out to an editor, and they've come back with me, and maybe they're being kind, but I've gotten the response so many times of, I love the idea, I can't sell it, but if you publish it somewhere, tell me where to find it. Well, this is where I'm publishing it now, is all those things that were entertaining and engaging, but not able to be sold, and nothing that had a hook for a media outlet to publish it and pay you. I'm putting those out now, and people are really responding to them. And I think the clickbait, the metrics chasing, the social algorithms have really gutted online media in the last 3 to 4 years. A lot of good outlets have been driven out of business or been diminished by trying to chase what they think people want. There was infamous pivots to video, or chasing the Facebook algorithm when Facebook algorithm is incorrect or misreported. And Substack really gives writers a chance to connect with readers. I think that's so important. And that's why I think it's important to write about what you believe in, and don't dilute it. Don't try to write it like you're writing for a large media organization and trying to meet somebody else's editorial mandates. Write what you believe in, find a small audience. Those people will be the first people to sign up, as a free subscriber. And later on, if you choose to go the paid route, those people will be the first people to sign up as paying subscribers. If you have a small contingent of believers, then you've really got something, and Substack allows you to keep going and grow that. My first couple of months doing this, I had very few people reading this, but I kept doing it, hoping people would show up, and they did. And so I think that's the, I want to thank Substack for all the support that they have given me. I think there are great companies, there's great people there. They believe in writers right now. That's really important to have a company that's believing about writers and growing. Sorry, I got lost in my notes here. On the note of writing what you believe in, actually, I had an example that I wanted to share. I wrote a post a few months ago about my children's stuffed animals. I have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they each have a beloved stuffed animal, a stuffed panda and a stuffed monkey. And I found that in my late 30s, I didn't expect that I would be so emotionally involved with 2 stuffed animals, but I am constantly concerned about them not getting lost, about where they are. This is a pitch that no editor would take. There's no way to sell this post about me getting sentimental about my children's stuffed animals. And the amount of reaction that I got to this post was amazing. I probably had a dozen people email me directly about that post saying, my kids are the same age, I feel the same way right now, or my kids are your age now, but I remember this when they were little. And being able to write something like that would not get published anywhere else, but makes an emotional connection with people, that's remarkable. And Substack is providing a way to actually turn that into a business and not just, screaming into the ether on your personal blog. So, anyways, thank you all for listening. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me, and thank you to Substack for providing this platform. I have to encourage you all to sign up for the Action Cookbook newsletter, Action Cookbook at Substack.com. I think I see Nadia's back on the screen. Great.
Thanks, Scott. Super, super interesting. Lots of good tidbits in here. And thanks also to folks that are sort of summarizing things in the chat for everybody else. I've been sort of going through these questions and trying to find useful ones to ask you. So I'm just going to kick it off here. Andrea asks, you're a parent, newsletter author, full-time architect. How much time does a newsletter take to write during the week? And did it take longer in the beginning when you had fewer followers?
That's a great question. Time during the week, I would imagine on average, I spend about 3 to 4 hours, probably 2 to 3 hours on the midweek posts and 3 to 4 on the end of week posts. 8 to 10 hours per week is my personal take from that. The one thing that I found is I'm just always writing ahead, that, I've got notebooks full of, okay, what idea can I pull from later? And something that I think that's going to really click with me in 2 weeks ends up languishing. And it's a commitment, but also staying ahead of the ideas allows me to be efficient with my time, because I have a full-time job, I have children. Is linking up to, an idea that I have now, then 2 weeks from now, when it's time for me to sit down to write, okay, well, I can write on that today, or maybe I can't, but hopefully that answers the question.
Hopefully. And Valerie asks a similar sort of related question, which is, how do you tackle taking a vacation? I'm going to add to that, especially since you now have paid subscriptions. Do you write a lot in advance and schedule out, or do you tell your readers you'll be taking a week off and not worry about posting?
That's a great question. I have yet to take a vacation. I'm actually on vacation right now. That's how I'm able to do this during the middle of the workday, is that I plan to take a trip this week. Thursday is my birthday. We were going to go somewhere and do something, and obviously now we're not. So I'm still writing this week, but generally I write ahead for something like that. For the holidays, I wrote ahead and scheduled. I don't like to actually physically schedule the post far in advance, because I like to always take a last look at it before I publish it, but I tried to get ahead. I know Substack offers the tools to pause subscriptions, I believe. Yes. I just haven't used that yet.
I'm sorry that you're doing this instead of going on a great vacation somewhere, but we're glad.
Hey, At least I'm not trying to work and watch my kids at the same time this week.
Jacob asks how to find more audience and readers outside of Substack if you don't have a following on social media. I guess just sort of broadly wondering a little bit about, could you touch on things that don't involve talking to Twitter followers or a following that you have somewhere else?
That's a great question. I mean, like I have what I would consider a moderate Twitter following. I have, I think like 18,000, which is good. I mean, it certainly helped me, but it's not a big media megaphone. I'm not verified, any of that. I think the same things of, even if you have people who know you well, social promotion is important. And again, the things I said about provide, if you write something that you're good at and you have a paragraph you can highlight, do that. And just hope that it will catch on. Be engaging with other Substack writers. I think that's a big deal too. And I think the great thing is that if a post gets good views, it hops up in the charts on Substack along with everybody else. I love when not to be competitive, but I love when I see my post, one slot above of somebody who's got a huge professional outlet. So, and that feeds back to presence too, of make it look professional. And, if you have to reply to people with it, make it look good and hope the audience shows up.
Someone asks, how do you decide how many newsletters to send? 3 is a lot from one company, but not a lot if you think about it in magazine terms. I'm guessing this is about how do you decide how many to send per week?
Sure. And I think that is honestly what you can commit to. 3 seems like a lot for one person to be producing, but that's what I had gotten used to writing before, and it's what I felt like I could personally put out. Some weeks it's a stretch. Some of the best Substacks that I subscribe to, and I subscribe to a number, publish once a week, and that's great. I think the biggest thing is what you feel you can put work out that you're proud of. Do that. If it's one good one instead of 3 that you're not thrilled about, then 3 is not the right number. I like biting off more than I can chew.
Let's see. Ross asks, how do you leverage threads to grow your newsletter? And there are a couple of related questions about discussion threads. Could you just touch a little bit on what your experience is? I know you mentioned it a little bit in your talk, but what your how to leverage that.
It's the funniest things that can get people engaged. And, you see this on Twitter a lot. Somebody will ask an open-ended question. I haven't done a ton of threads myself, but the most engagement I've gotten on a single thread was I asked a question about people's favorite pen. And people love having an opinion on the internet. And I think giving people a place to have their opinion, that everyone has surprisingly strong opinions about pens. There were, I think 70 plus comments on that one. I'm an acolyte of the Pilot Razor pen. That was mine. But I see somebody in the comments saying try Reddit to talk about your newsletter. I think that's a great idea too. I don't personally do it, but yeah, the discussion threads is find something that people want to have a strong opinion about. People have strong opinions about food and pens and, what would you do if this? But the most important thing I think when you post a thread is not trust the readers to carry it themselves, is to respond. The threads that I've had that are successful, half the comments are me because I'm responding to everybody. And that builds the buy-in. That builds this isn't just a person off in the internet talking to a screen. It's 2 ways.
See Kyle saying, clearly people do have strong opinions on pens because Kyle does not like the Pilot pen.
Oh yeah, see, talk about pens. Somebody should start a pen Substack. You'll do great.
Who knew? Let's see. Miriam asks, I was thinking of starting my Substack page and linking it to a separate website. Would you recommend having both? What would you recommend so my visitors don't get confused between my Substack and a personal website?
I think that can work. I actually had discussions about that when mine was connected to a podcast, And the reason I've kept everything in one place is that I love the Substack format and I love the metrics that I get from it. I like keeping it all in one place because then it's easier to manage. If you have an established personal website, then I think definitely work it in that direction of referring people to your Substack from that. If you have an email list, they'll carry it over. But I personally like having it all in one place.
Rajiv asks, I always hear that you should release or write consistently. What if you write about current events? Nowadays, 24 hours feels like a long time ago. What do you recommend for us who are social commentators who are writing about the zeitgeist as it unfolds? Have current events sort of changed the way that you think about the cadence of your writing?
And that's a great question. I think, partly what you can do with that is realize that not everybody can keep up. Even if you're keeping up, that's terrific. But a great format for your newsletter then might be catching people up because things move so fast. Some of the ones that I follow Tom Ziller's Good Morning, It's Basketball. It's a NBA newsletter. But there's a lot of news that I don't catch day to day in that particular topic. And Tom's email always catches me up. It might just be a list of what happened yesterday, but I think you can keep a regular schedule, and that may lend itself more to a daily newsletter than to a weekly one. But recognizing that your utility might be at 8 a.m. telling the people who can't keep up with their Twitter feed what happened in the last day.
David asks, did you ever post that you're sure we get a buzz but totally flopped? What was it?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
About the good ones, but no one ever talks about the ones that just flop.
It works both ways. That there's the ones that I totally believe are gonna click and just sort of fall flat. And I try not to think about what those are right now, so I can't pull an example. But the flip side are the ones that I don't think are gonna do anything, that just go nuts. I mean, like I referenced that one about screwing up a batch of dumplings. That I liked the post, but I was really just trying to make lemonade from something that I had screwed up from a later newsletter plan, and that caught on huge. Prior to my Substack days, I had a piece that I wrote for a sports blog where I was parodying the clickbait sort of health posts, and I titled it "I ate 3 eggs every day for a week. Here's what happened," which was the exact title of a real post that I had seen on a running website, but I spun it as the apocalypse happened that week. I wrote this on my lunch hour in 30 minutes. I sent it off thinking, well, this is weird, but here we go, and that got over 1 million views.
Wow.
You never know what's going to take. Something catches somebody's eye who posts it. It catches somebody's bigger eye, and suddenly, a prominent science fiction writer is sharing your post about eggs. To answer the question, yes, there's stuff that I think they do great that completely falls dead flat. The nice thing about Substack is at least still a base of people read it, even if they just look at it and like, oh, okay, well, Scott didn't do a good job today. But the optimistic side of that is the stuff that you don't know is going to take that does is a lot of fun.
Do you ever feel, I'm injecting my own question here, but almost like a sense of like nihilism, I guess, of like sometimes you write these posts that you are just sort of whatever and they do insanely well, and sometimes you spend so much time on something and it's just like no one cares and you're just like, subject to winds of luck and time. Like, how do you?
Yeah. Totally. But it's freeing. I find it really freeing that instead of worrying about like, well, is this too weird? Like, you know what, when I thought that and those have done well, or is this too esoteric? Who's going to care about that? It's freed me from worrying about how each post is going to do because I have no idea. Every once in a while, I'm confident. At the very beginning of the lockdowns, I posted an op-ed from the perspective of my dog that was her complaining about us being at home. I knew that was going to do well, and it did well. Sometimes but most of the time it's like, well, I'm going to write whatever I feel like, and who knows what'll happen.
Let's see. Phil asks, maybe in a similar vein, have you ever had your subscriber numbers stall? And if so, what have you done to break that plateau? Which is definitely a question.
Yeah, I definitely have. Actually, I had this run in the fall where I was gaining a dozen a day, and it felt terrific. And then a month later, it completely plateaued, and I was, barely gaining day over day. And I think it's just it's fight through it. That going back to what I said, I can't predict how any post is going to do. I just kept doing the stuff that had worked when people were subscribing, and it's unpredictable. I look at that chart all the time that Substack provides of me of my subscribers, and there's a lot of like, stair steps to it, but the trend line is consistent. And it slows down over time, but yeah, I just had to keep hacking through it. And then something that I didn't expect to catch on. Actually, that dumplings post was right after a long stall, and then I gained like 100 followers the next day. So keep doing what you're doing and believe in it.
We have a couple questions from people that are asking just a little bit about the paid side of things. So
Mhm.
how do you convert, Dennis asks, how do you convert free subscribers into paid? Do you give your best content away for free and then exclusive for paid? Is it the other way around? How do you think about your free versus paid content?
Sure. There's a lot of theories about how to do this. I know, and I got some great advice from the people at Substack, is to not put your best content, the things that you think that are going to do really well, to not put that behind the paywall because you need to grow. Recognizing that the people who are likely to turn over as paying subscribers are probably there for all of it. They like you. If they're willing to do it, they like you. What I ended up doing is, and so it could be a difference of opinion as to what is my best content, but the Friday thing with the recipes and the book and music suggestions and stuff, I put that behind the paywall because that I know is the people who read that every week are going to stay for that. But the stuff that I think the swing for the fences sort of things, the higher ceiling stuff, that I'm leaving out with the hopes that you don't want to cap off something that's going to be your next viral piece. That's something that's going to really grab readers. And I think the consistency matters. That if you're asking people to pay, they need to know what they're getting. And for me, it had been a solid 7 to 8 months of me doing the same schedule every week for weeks on end. When I ask people to pay, it's like, well, you know what you're getting. It's not that you're subscribing and maybe I'll drop something twice this week and once next week, and like it's defined. I think that makes a big difference.
Venkatesh, Scott, I see something like 144 posts. How long did it take you to reach 100 emails, 500 emails, 1,000 email signups? Are there any, well, covered some of these lessons, but and just very curious, like if you were to put it out in like a rough time scale, like how long did it take forever to get to those first 100 versus like getting to 1,000? Did things go a lot faster after 1,000?
Yeah, it took me, and this is a funny thing about sell your work and some of the stuff that I suggested I didn't know at first. I would say it was the first month and a half I was writing for under 100 people, and then I started to break ahead. I got to 500 the day that I converted after months of doing this under the podcast aegis. When I converted, I got to 500. That was in October, so June to October, about 3 or 4 months. And then 500 to 1,000 just rocketed for me. That was the fastest growth that I've had, is 500 to 1,000. I think that was when there were enough people reading it to share it and to tell other people about it. And then after 1,000, it's sort of been slow and steady, again, sort of stair steps. But I hit 2,000. Gosh, when did I hit 2,000? I think in March. So I've been doing it for about 9 months. 9 months. And as I said, I'm at 2,350 now after 10 or 11 months right now.
Which of those,
so it was very slow at the start, and then a sharp ramp up after a couple of months.
Got it. I think I'm going to wrap up on this last question from Dennis, who asked, do you have any favorite Substack newsletters? I know you plugged Ziller. Are there any other ones, any other writers or anything that come to mind? Also, even off
Yeah.
that you like.
Yeah. Some of the ones that I read, my freelance came from a sports media background, so a lot of them are sports related. Matt Brown, Extra Points, Matt Brown at Substack.com. He writes about college football and sort of the very minutia of the business of how it works. That was actually the newsletter that inspired me to start one. So I'm a big fan of that. Also, Lindsay Gibbs' Power Plays, writing about women's sports, I think is really great. And Chuck McKeever's Tabs Open. I read that. I think that's a once a week newsletter. And that's just somebody that I came to through social, didn't know him, but a lot of heartfelt writing. I bought a book that he promoted through it, I'd say those are the top ones. And as I said, and then Tom Zipper's, my dog in the background. Yeah. If people know me, they know I have a dog, so there she is. But yeah, Tom Ziller's Good Morning is Basketball I find very informative. Oddly enough, in a time with no sports, some of the ones that I'm enjoying the most are sports newsletters.
Sweet. Thanks for all the great recommendations. And thank you for sharing all your advice. It looks like a lot of people have found it incredibly useful. I'm going to end this broadcast now, but thanks, Scott.
Thank you very much.